have to bring our party together. We have to bring it together. We have something happening that actually makes the Republican Party probably the biggest political story anywhere in the world. Everybody's writing about it all over Europe, all over the world they're talking about it. Millions of people are coming in to vote.
For those who thought the GOP apple cart had been completely upended by Donald Trump and the clown car of commentary could not possibly be jam-packed any tighter, you have not been paying attention. In the last few hours, these shiny little gems have dropped. John Kasich is single-handedly helping Trump secure the nomination. The GOP leader has handed Fox News another slap in the face. The guy who said just last week he wanted nothing to do with a possible convention nomination shockingly backed up on that claim, then backed up again. A veteran voice of the conservative movement can't seem to grasp the fact one failed candidate is not what anybody wants. And to prove we are living in a bizarro world, a shrill but leading Democratic voice has expressed her love for all things Trump. Sort of. I'm Ed Berliner. This is The Hard Line. Grab the keys. Let's get this car started. We begin with the veteran political commentator and contributor at the Federalist, D.C. McAllister, joined by the veteran political commentator and writer at the National Review Online, David French. Thank you for joining us. We're all veterans, so let's go ahead and get right to her. David, I begin with you. Donald Trump talks about a brokered convention today. Has everybody talking where he says, if it is a brokered convention, I think you'd have riots. Is this not just Donald Trump continuing to play the same game that he has? It's not as if he means there's going to be riots, but he can get away with it, and he's making a point.
Oh, absolutely, he's making a point. I mean, this is a guy, he always has to be the toughest guy in the room. He always has to walk the line, sometimes stride right over the line. But here's my concern. I think in the Republican convention, there could be, I'm not going to say riots, but some acts of whether it's a brokered convention or not. The radical left, the activist left, which has been enabled for some time now by the left media, sees no problem with disrupting conventions. It sees no problem with trying to shut down a convention. And Trump also sees no problem in fighting fire with fire, eye for an eye. So we could be on the verge of something that we haven't seen since 1968.
See, and I brought 1968 up before. People who don't know history again, Chicago, the riots inside the convention center. We're not necessarily talking outside the convention center. We're talking about what happened inside the center. So, D.C., when we look at something like this, is it not fair to say that right now you've got people from MoveOn.org and other radicals who are out there? They are making their plans. They are going to show up in Chicago. They're going to make a mess of this. But at the end of the day, are they not just playing right into Donald Trump's hands?
I think we're definitely going to see from the left, and we did in Chicago, and they're going to disrupt the convention. And David's right. I mean, there's just stirring the pot going on with Donald Trump, and he comes out and says there's probably going to be riots if there's a brokered convention. I mean, a lot of people will say that, but he is the front runner, and he needs to watch his language in this. And he had one of his supporters today say that she welcomed riots coming in Cleveland because that's the people rising up and speaking out. I don't think she meant violence, but she definitely said there needs to be a strong standing of emotion to show that this is the will of the people. This is something for the Republican Party to consider. I mean, do they want this kind of backlash? I mean, whether it's right or not, it's something that simply is and needs to be taken into account when you keep someone like Kasich in the race to force a brokered convention. And that needs to be seriously considered.
Let's talk about then who may or may not be then the next president of the United States. And again, it is flying fast and furious today. Rush Limbaugh on his show believes that it doesn't matter who gets the most votes during the primary process because he is convinced, and he is the conservative broadcast icon, that if they get to the convention, Donald Trump will not be the nominee, and he already has somebody in mind who will be. Here's what he said.
If they succeed in denying Trump or Cruz 1,237 delegates by the end of the primary process, I'm here to tell you Jeb Bush is going to be the nominee. That's what they're going to do. That's what they've always wanted.
David, I'm sorry. I have respected Rush Limbaugh for many years. Many people respect what he says, but I think on this one, he is flat out on the fringe. Although, wait a minute, could we just be missing something here? There's a conspiracy going on to get Jeb Bush the nomination? Come on.
No, I do not think, I'm going to say right now, Jeb Bush is not going to be the nominee. That's just not going to happen. Look, the dynamic a lot of people are missing with this, with the brokered convention talk, is that the delegates, a vast majority of them, even if they're not a majority Trump, are going to be a majority of Trump and Cruz delegates. Those are not going to be people who are going to go happily along with just whoever the quote unquote establishment serves up to them. A majority will have to include a huge number of Trump and Cruz delegates. So that kind of nominee would be somebody very different from a Jeb Bush. We have to realize who the delegates will be this time. Trump's delegates are not going to be voting for Jeb Bush. Cruz delegates are not going to be voting for Jeb Bush or the equivalent. That's one of the reasons why it will be so chaotic, that the vast majority of the delegates will not be going along with any sort of establishment power play in the convention. So it will get very interesting very fast if Trump does not get the majority.
D.C., here's the next side of this. Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, their advisors, say there is absolutely no way they will allow John Kasich to even compete at the competition, or at the convention rather, let alone even try to get the nomination. They're not going to let him. They'll block him. Meantime, Dick Morris' comment out today says that John Kasich could assure Trump's victory if he continues to stick around. He's just siphoning votes off Ted Cruz. Out of those two things that are said, which do you believe?
I mean, I agree with Dick. He's definitely siphoning off the votes from Ted Cruz. So this is what frustrates me so much as a conservative. If you really believe in principles, you really don't want Donald Trump in there because you don't like his populist principles and you don't think he's a conservative, then why is Kasich staying in the race? Why not pressure him to get out so that the true conservative can actually win and bring home the victory?
Because he can't win. That's what we have to say out loud, right? There is no way that he is going to win the nomination, even if he comes in with all great intentions.
He can make a plurality that's competitive when he does go into that contested convention. And that's something that actually could happen. And Ted Cruz is gearing up for that, is when you actually have brokering and vying for those candidates and those delegates at the convention between Cruz and Trump. And that's more realistic if Cruz is right there up with Trump. But it's not going to come from someone who only has 100 delegates. And that would be crazy. And that would be stealing the nomination. And that would cause probably people to backlash. But when you have someone like Cruz who could actually roll along and be very competitive and then both under the majority, then you can have something real and American and constitutional going on at the conventions.
David, here's something else. Paul Ryan last week said, I'm not going to be the nominee. Then there was a PAC out there that misguidedly said, okay, we're going to go ahead and try and draft you and raise money. He said, get away from me. I don't need you. I don't want it. Then he said in the last 48 hours, well, maybe I'll consider it. Then today he comes out and says flat out to Politico, I am not going to be the nominee. Which Paul Ryan do we believe? And quite frankly, is there any chance whatsoever that Paul Ryan would even have a shot if he decided to get involved here?
When push comes to shove, I don't believe Paul Ryan will be the nominee either. I think he has less of a chance than a John Kasich. And I agree with everything just said. John Kasich right now, and I'll go even a little further, it's almost like he's a vandal. He is being destructive to the party right now by staying in the race. Look, he won Ohio, his home state, with a minority of the vote and still has less delegates than Marco Rubio. Yet he's hanging in there, and he will siphon off 10% here, 15% there, 5% there, and all along he will be doing real damage to the conservative principles he claims to uphold. So this is a vanity act at this point, and it's deeply destructive. As far as who it will be, I seriously doubt that the product of a brokered convention will be a stereotypical establishment figure. I could be wrong about that, but again, it is hard for me to see enough Trump and Cruz delegates going along with that after an anti-establishment primary to reach a compromise on someone who belongs to the entrenched political class.
All right, now I never thought that we'd actually say that Debbie Wasserman Schultz had something really smart to say, but she actually did. The DNC chair said, quote, she's actually going, let's dispel with the notion that Donald Trump is a fringe candidate. Tonight, he became the presumptive Republican nominee. D.C., he is now the man in control as well because he basically told Fox, I don't need to show up for a debate on Monday. Fox then canceled it. There really don't need to be any more debates at this point. Isn't it just an exercise in futility now to even think we need more debates? And the exercise that Debbie Wasserman Schultz is pointing out here, stop trying to think that he is not the presumptive nominee. Get on with it.
Well, he's not the presumptive nominee at this point by the numbers. He's just not.
By the numbers, by the numbers, yes.
Well, he's crowned that on himself, and there's still a fight to be had. I mean, Cruz has a long shot, but he still does have somewhat of a shot. And, to just down himself as king of, the presumptive nominee is something Trump has done that for himself, and so I don't think it's really that smart of a statement by her. I mean, she's just playing along with him, and she wants him to be the presumptive nominee.
There you go. There's the point.
And that's really, she's stirring the pot politically. And Donald Trump really wants to get away and start attacking Hillary Clinton, too, and get into that general election, which is going to be very interesting. But no, he is definitely not stirring, she's definitely stirring the pot there.
I love it, the fact that you saw right through that, because that's exactly what she's doing. She's just helping it. Everybody's going, my goodness, look what she said. She's a fan of Donald Trump. No, she's not. 30 seconds here, David. At this point in time, is there any reason to believe that Ted Cruz can win enough and actually mount a challenge come the convention?
I think there's a good reason to believe that he can. I don't think there's good reason to believe he can get to the magic number by the time of the convention. But I think if they get into the convention and Donald Trump does not have a majority of the delegates when he gets to the convention, my prediction is that Donald Trump will not be the nominee. My prediction would be that Ted Cruz would be the nominee in that circumstance, because I think the GOP would take a long look in the mirror and it would know that if it nominated Trump, it would lose its soul.
There you go.
And Ted Cruz is the conservative.
We'll have to end it there and say, thankfully, there's no debate on Monday, which means everybody can catch up on House of Cards. D.C. McAllister, David French, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us. Stick around. We're moving to foreign policy next, right here on The Hard Line.